Muscles part two. So in the last video, hopefully you remember watching it, you learned about how muscles are put together and about myofibrils and the proteins actin and myosin. You learned about how nervous signals come in and stimulate a muscle to contract, causing the sarcomere to shorten, and how that's done by the electrical signal getting passed through the sarcoplasmic reticulum. It's passed through the T-tubules and calcium is released, kicking off this chain reaction. So we're going to talk more about the chain reaction and then add a few other cool things about details. Just so you know, this picture is a picture of me. So sorry you had to see me with my shirt off, but there it is. All right, how do actin and myosin cause the muscle to contract? All right, so big picture, I'm going to add more detail in the coming slides. So we already talked about how calcium initiates myosin interacting with actin and pulling on the actin, causing the sarcomere to shorten, which is basically what's driving a muscle to contract. Know also, and we'll talk about this in more detail as we discuss the role of ATP, but know also that ATP is involved. So ATP is the power source that's being applied to the myosin so that it has the energy to pull on the actin. All right, and so that's the big picture. Let's add some details. And by the way, this idea of how muscle contracts is called the sliding filament model of muscle contraction. Right, and I put a YouTube link on here. If you don't like what I'm doing, you can go to YouTube, and a bunch of people have done this way better than I have, so you can watch some videos. So I put a couple of YouTube links, which you can find on the PowerPoint. Okay, let's talk about the sliding filament model of contraction. All right, so let's do it. Let's break it down stepwise. So at rest, the actin and the myosin, when the muscle's at rest, the actin and the myosin aren't attached to each other. Right, so you can see here's our myosin, here's the heads that are going to end up moving a little bit later, and then here's the actin ropes. Right, and you can see initially at rest, when you're relaxed, when you're sleeping, when you're not contracting a muscle, the actin and the myosin, there it is, when the actin and the myosin aren't touching each other. So now imagine a signal from your brain comes in and it's like, hey, contract this muscle. So the nervous signal causes calcium to wash over this. Here you can't see the calcium, you just have to imagine it. But the calcium comes in, and when calcium is present, it causes the myosin to attach to the actin. When this happens, we call it a cross bridge. This is an actin-myosin. Why does my thing keep disappearing? This is an actin-myosin cross bridge, right? And again, that's initiated by the presence of calcium. Once the myosin forms a cross bridge with the actin, it triggers the myosin to move. It makes that sound. And so this is called the power stroke. So we can see here that the myosin, they drew a little arrow, which is handy. The arrow is showing the myosin is now going this direction. In this picture, you can see the myosin's moved even more. And so the movement of the myosin, which, by the way, is attached to the actin because of the presence of calcium, that's going to pull this actin strand or filament in this direction. The same thing's going to happen over here where the myosin's pointed in the opposite direction. So calcium's going to cause it to form a cross bridge, and then it's going to automatically swing and create a power stroke, and that's going to pull this actin filament in this direction. So the result is this Z-band is going to move this way, and this Z-band is going to move this way, and overall the sarcomere is going to contract. And as that happens along each of the sarcomeres on the muscle fiber, the muscle will contract. All right, so that causes it to contract. How does it relax? It relaxes because ATP comes in. So ATP comes in, and ATP gets converted to ADP and P, like we learned about earlier in the semester. And it gives off some energy when that happens, and that energy unattaches the myosin from the actin, and it reloads it. So it's kind of like the trigger on a gun, right? So the trigger is snapping in the power stroke, and then ATP would be like your thumb pulling that trigger back so you can fire another shot. So ATP unattaches it and reloads it, If calcium is still here, then this whole thing starts over again. So in other words, if calcium is still here, we would go back up to this one. The myosin would attach to the actin again, forming a cross bridge. That would initiate a power stroke. That would pull the actin even more, contracting the sarcomere even further. And then ATP would come in and unattach it. If the calcium is still there, then it's going to repeat. So you can see how if you want a long, hard muscle contraction, then you're going to have a series of power strokes one after another. But if you want kind of a light, wimpy contraction, then by pulling the calcium out, then you're going to prevent the cross bridge from forming, and your muscle's going to relax, and the actin's going to slide back in this direction, and your sarcomere is going to lengthen. Let's talk about, oh, I found this funny cartoon from the web, but I think it's helpful. So here's the myosin, here's the actin. So when ATP is there, they're not attached, all right? Then calcium comes in. Then the ATP spends its energy and it cocks the myosin, so they're ready to do another power stroke. Calcium comes in, and the calcium causes the myosin to bond with the actin, and that leads to a power stroke. The myosin moves and it pulls on the actin, and then ATP comes in, releases the myosin, right? Recocks it, and then if calcium is present, it does it again for another power stroke. So it's kind of like if you were, if calcium is there, it's kind of like if you were pulling a rope in, right? So it's going to happen over and over, just like your hands are going to go and grab that rope over and over and reel the rope in. In the presence of calcium with the help of ATP, myosin is just going to reel the actin filament in, and that's what shortens the muscle. I hope that cartoon was enjoyable for you. All right, here it is again. So it's those same steps we saw before, so let's break it down. So initially, the actin and the myosin are not attached, right? In the presence of calcium, we get a cross bridge forming. Once the cross bridge forms, we get a power stroke, which you can see here and here, pulling the actin. ATP breaks the cross bridge, reloads the myosin, and it's ready for all of this to repeat if calcium is still present. If calcium is not present, then the muscle relaxes and the actin slides back and the sarcomere returns to its regular width. So you can see, oh yeah, I forgot to show you that. So if calcium is present, we go back up to here. So you can get several power strokes as long as the calcium is still present. How do you get rid of the calcium, by the way? Maybe I should have told you that before. So the calcium gets released by the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and then the sarcoplasmic reticulum can take it back up. So again, if you want to contract your muscle, the sarcoplasmic reticulum is going to release the calcium and leave it there, leading to a couple of power strokes. And when you want the muscle to stop contracting, then you pump the calcium back out, and then the actin and the myosin aren't attached anymore, and then the muscle relaxes. All right, it's also important to remember that ATP is the power source of this whole process. So every time you contract a muscle, you're burning some ATP. And the more frequently or the longer the contraction, then the more ATP you're going to end up burning. So it takes energy to move, which shouldn't come as a surprise. Okay, so here's the same thing one more time. So here's how we start. Myosin and actin are not attached. They attach, it pulls it in even more on a cross bridge, and then ATP reloads it. And then the whole thing starts over. It wasn't helpful. I thought that was going to be more impressive, but it was kind of terrible. Here's another YouTube video that shows it in case you guys are annoyed by me. All right, so hopefully that helped. I don't know if it did. I can't read your faces. I can't take questions, but hopefully you understand more now how a muscle is constructed, how a nervous signal interacts with the sarcoplasmic reticulum to release calcium, which initiates a contraction, and then the sliding filament model of muscle contraction kind of breaks it down into steps, showing how a muscle contracts with the help of ATP. All right, are all muscle fibers the same? If they were, I wouldn't be asking this question. Muscle fibers are different. So we can group muscle fibers into two categories. They can be red muscle fibers or white muscle fibers. So in red muscle, there's lots of mitochondria, and they produce ATP really quickly using aerobic respiration. And the result is the muscle, it's a little darker when you look at it because of the presence of all the ATP, or the presence of all of these structures that allow it to be red muscle fiber. So at Thanksgiving dinner, when you eat dark meat, you're eating red muscle fibers. At Thanksgiving dinner, when you're eating the white meat, you're eating white muscle fibers. So white muscle fibers have fewer mitochondria, and they're more likely to undergo anaerobic respiration. So they're not quite as efficient. Right? So you can see that down here. Some muscles are in between. So some muscles are a mix of white and red, and so they're kind of in between. They have a medium amount of mitochondria. All right? So the muscles in your body are a mixture. Some are red, some are white, some are something in between, and that differs from person to person. So if a muscle has a lot of red muscle fiber in it, then we call it a fast muscle fiber or a fast twitch muscle. All right? And these are good for shoot, did I say that right? So let me just start over. I hope you can fast forward. You can't fast forward the video. You've already watched me mess up. Let's just start over. So muscle fibers can either be fast or slow, or sometimes called fast twitch or slow twitch. If they're fast twitch, the muscle fibers react really quickly and contract, but they get tired quickly. So white muscle fiber is typically fast twitch, right? And so you find fast twitch, see, that's what's throwing me off. It says fast red muscles. Man, I really blew it on this slide. You tend to find white muscle fibers or fast twitch muscles in people that are good at sprinting, right? So if you're good at sprinting, then you got a lot of white muscle fibers, and your muscles will react quickly, but you'll get tired really quickly. That's why you're a good sprinter. If you're a good long distance runner, then you have more slow twitch muscles. So these muscles respond more slowly. You're not as quick off the starting blocks, so to speak, but the muscles don't wear out as quickly. And so in slow muscle fibers, they're often found in muscle groups that they have to flex for long periods of time. So like the muscles in your back are slow muscles. So they just kind of like keep you upright for long periods of time, and just kind of help you stay upright. So again, some people have more slow twitch, some people have more fast twitch, so we're all made a little bit differently. That's why some people are good at sprinting and some people are good at running longer distances. And some people are in between, and so they're more middle distance runners. So that was really bad, guys. I'm sorry, but I don't really have the ability to edit, so we're stuck with it. All right, what happens to our muscles when we exercise? What's going on? Great question, Dr. E. Well, thanks. Glad you liked it. Let's answer it. So it takes ATP to contract muscles. Remember, we learned about how ATP helps detach actin from myosin so we can do more power strokes. So every time you contract a muscle, you burn through some ATP. So that means your muscles need a supply of ATP. Where are they going to get it? Your muscles are going to get ATP because they're going to make it using some of the food that you ate, represented by glucose, with the help of oxygen that you breathed in, that are both fed to your mitochondria in order to make ATP through the process of aerobic respiration, like we learned about earlier in the semester. So again, every time you contract a muscle, you burn some ATP. So exercising helps you lose weight because you need to make ATP and you need to burn some glucose. And so when you exercise, you end up burning some of the energy reserves in your body to make ATP to power your muscles flexing. And sometimes you can even dip into your energy reserves, like in where you have fat deposits. So exercising helps you lose weight by tapping into those stored energy reserves. Why do you get tired when you exercise? Muscle fatigue is the name of this. Muscle fatigue is simply a decrease in a muscle's capacity to generate force. Right? So your muscles get tired. So if you've been lifting weights, maybe you can do 5 reps of 100 pounds, but the 6th one is getting tougher, the 7th one is really tough, and the 8th one, you're collapsing in a heap on the floor. What's going on? Well, your muscles have used the ATP that they have available, and they've used the energy stores that they have readily available. And then as you contract those muscles, as you lift the weights, you start running out of ATP, or you start running out of oxygen. And so the muscles get weakened or get fatigued. If you were to lift weights every couple of days or to run every couple of days, then you're going to get in shape. What does that mean? It just means that doing those exercises makes your muscles resistant to fatigue, because your body ends up building more blood vessels to them so you can get oxygen and glucose to them. It might increase the number of mitochondria in your muscles. It might make your heart stronger so it can deliver oxygen more efficiently. So the point is, working your muscles out frequently and over long periods of time helps make them more efficient so they can supply lots of ATP and generate lots of forceful contractions. That's what being in shape is. To illustrate that, let's compare what happens when someone who's not in shape exercises versus someone who's in shape. All right, so let's say the not in shape dude exercises and the in shape dude exercises. They both go for a run, right? They're both going to start pumping oxygen that they're breathing in and delivering it via their arteries to their muscles so their muscles can make ATP through aerobic respiration. The not in shape dude stinks at this. His heart maybe is not as strong, his doesn't have as many arteries, maybe doesn't have as many red blood cells, whatever, and so he's not going to get enough oxygen to his muscles. They're going to run out of ATP, or things like he's trying to send a bunch of oxygen to his muscles, and then his brain is like, hey, quit sending oxygen to muscles, I gotta live up here in the skull. And so the body's like, okay, well, let's shut off blood supply to the muscles so that our brain doesn't die. But meanwhile, the in-shape dude who's been running consistently, they're able to deliver oxygen sufficiently to their muscles, which can make ATP, and they're going to be able to keep running. So the not in shape dude is going to feel tired. The in shape dude is not going to feel tired for a while, and the not in shape dude will die, and the in shape dude will live forever. All right, exercise. Continued. So, interesting fact, you're born with a certain amount of muscle cells, and so exercising or lifting weights doesn't build new muscle. It actually just makes the existing muscles larger. How do you make muscles larger? Well, your muscles are really just actin and myosin proteins. So when you work out your muscles, your body will just synthesize more actin and myosin. So your muscles get bigger, like mine are, because I've added a ton of actin and myosin by working out my muscles by lifting weights. That's why they get bigger. It's also why you get stronger. With more actin and myosin, you can lift more weight. This is also why when you work out, you might want to take some protein shakes, because by drinking protein, consuming protein, you're going to break down those proteins into amino acids, and then you can use those amino acids to build new actin and myosin proteins in your muscles. The end.